The entire executive board watched it happen. Every person in that room saw Daniel Reese pick up the proposal, the one he had spent 3 weeks building, the one with his name at the top, and drop it into the trash can beside her chair. She didn't read a page. She didn't open the cover. She simply looked at the man who had handed it to her, and then she looked at the trash can, and she made her decision in the time it takes to breathe out. "Get him out of this room," she said. And the room obeyed. Because that was what rooms did when Daniel Reese spoke in that particular tone. What no one in that room knew, what Diana herself could not have imagined, was that the man being escorted to the door was not leaving defeated. He was leaving with a plan. And by the next morning, when he walked back through those doors with a signed letter of commitment worth $3 million and a client's name on it, every person who had watched him go would understand exactly what they had done. And exactly what it had cost them. The downtown offices of Apex Financial Solutions occupied floors 11 through 15 of a building that looked, from the outside, like authority made permanent in glass and steel. Daniel Reese had worked there for 8 years. 8 years of arriving before the cleaning crew finished and leaving after the last elevator had made its final run. 8 years of closing accounts that other people had written off as dead, of building client relationships that outlasted 3 rounds of company restructuring, of doing the kind of work that filled the quarterly reports everyone celebrated without anyone ever mentioning his name specifically. He was good at his job. He had known it for years, the way you know something you have stopped expecting anyone to confirm. What Daniel was not good at, what he had never learned and never tried to learn, was the performance of being good at his job. The lunch meetings with executives. The casual mentions of his wins in the right conversations. The way the successful people at Apex moved through the building as though they were already being observed by someone important. Daniel moved through the building like a man with somewhere to be. And in the hierarchy of a company like Apex, the difference between those two things was the difference between being seen and being invisible. He had made peace with invisible a long time ago. A man raising a child alone learns to measure his pride against what actually matters. And what actually mattered to Daniel Reese lived at home, not here. His son's name was Marcus. He was 10 years old and had his mother's eyes, dark and direct and the kind that saw more than most people realized, and a habit of asking questions at breakfast that required Daniel to think harder than anything he encountered at work. Marcus's mother had left when Marcus was 3. Not violently, not with cruelty, just gone, in the way some people go when the life they're living stops resembling the one they imagined. She had been honest about it, which Daniel had appreciated more than he'd expected to. She had sat across from him at the kitchen table and told him she loved Marcus and that she was not the mother Marcus needed her to be, and that leaving before she caused damage she couldn't repair was the most responsible thing she could do. He had not argued. He had held Marcus for a long time after. And then he had made dinner. And the next morning he had packed Marcus's lunch for school. And the morning after that. And every morning since. 7 years of mornings. Without a single exception. Daniel's daily ritual with Marcus was the note. Every morning, before he left for work, he wrote one sentence on a small piece of paper and tucked it into Marcus's lunch bag. Not a long note. Never more than one sentence. "You are the reason I'm good at anything. The bravest thing I know is you, eating that lunch. I'll be at pickup at 3:30. Count on it." Marcus kept the notes. Daniel had discovered this accidentally, had opened the wrong drawer in Marcus's desk one Saturday morning looking for a pen and found a stack of folded papers, each one a note from a different morning, held together with a rubber band. He had closed the drawer very quietly. He had never mentioned it. He had never missed a morning since. Marcus's health challenge was a blood disorder, a manageable condition, treated successfully with monthly medication that cost more than it should and required specialist appointments every 8 weeks across the city. Daniel had structured his entire professional life around the appointment schedule. He had turned down 2 promotions in 8 years because both required travel that would have put him on a plane during Marcus's treatment weeks. He had never explained why to anyone at Apex. He simply declined and went back to work. And the promotions had gone to people who were available to travel, and the story the executives told themselves was that Daniel Reese was a man without ambition. The story they were telling was wrong. Daniel had ambition the size of a building. He simply had something that mattered more than feeding it. The deal that the whole department had spent a quarter pursuing was a partnership with a company called Crestline Partners. $3 million. A contract that would carry Apex through 2 years of careful margins and nervous board conversations. Every senior person in the company had touched the official proposal at some point. The CEO, Daniel Reese, had built her entire quarterly strategy around winning it. The signing was set for the following afternoon. The tension in the building was the specific kind that makes people shorter with each other in the elevator and longer at their desks in the evening. Daniel had spent 3 weeks building something no one had asked him to build. He had read Crestline's filings, the public ones, the regulatory ones, the quarterly statements that most people skimmed, and he had read the way he read Marcus's homework, looking for the place where something didn't quite add up. What he found was that Apex's official proposal, the one Diana had signed and stamped and was preparing to present tomorrow, addressed a problem Crestline did not actually have. It was a beautiful solution to the wrong question. And Daniel had found the right question. He had spent 2 weeks building the answer to it. It was the best work he had ever done. He walked into the executive meeting on a Tuesday morning carrying it. Diana Reeves ran Apex Financial Solutions the way she ran everything, with the absolute certainty of someone who had been right enough times to stop questioning whether she could be wrong. She was 43 years old. Sharp in a way that arrived before she did. She had built Apex from a mid-sized regional firm into a company whose name carried weight in rooms she wasn't present in, and she had done it through a combination of genuine intelligence and the specific confidence that comes from having your intelligence confirmed by results over and over, until the confirmation felt like proof of something permanent. She did not dislike Daniel Reese. She simply did not see him. In her world, a world organized entirely around who commanded attention and who did not, the two were the same. The conference room held the full executive team that morning. 14 people around a polished table, the city visible through the glass on two sides, the kind of room designed to remind everyone in it that the decisions made here mattered. Daniel waited for an opening, then stood and placed his proposal on the table in front of Diana. He kept his voice level as he began to explain. He had found a different angle. One he believed matched Crestline's actual situation more precisely. One that. Diana looked at the proposal for 3 seconds. Then she picked it up. Then she dropped it into the trash can beside her chair. The sound it made landing was not loud. But every person in the room heard it. "I don't need to read it to know it's wrong," she said. The flatness in her voice was the worst part. There was no anger in it, no heat. The way you speak about something that is simply beneath your attention. She turned to the rest of the table. "This is what happens when someone confuses effort with understanding," she said. "A man at his level doesn't rewrite the strategy the morning before we close the deal. He doesn't have the full picture. He's working from a portion of the information we have." The words were designed to be remembered. Everyone understood that. A current of quiet amusement ran through the executives, the kind of laughter that costs the people producing it nothing and costs the person it is aimed at considerably more. Richard, the senior director who had spent a decade perfecting the art of agreeing with Diana before she finished her sentences, tilted his head with a smile. Susan, near the window, looked at her notes. The room had made its choice before Daniel walked in. His error had been believing the work would matter more than the hierarchy. Diana let the laughter settle. Then she did the thing that turned a humiliation into something permanent. "Since you're so certain about this," she said, looking directly at Daniel, "let's make it a real test. If you walk into this room tomorrow morning with a signed commitment from Crestline on your terms," she gestured toward the trash can, "on whatever version you've built in there, I'll resign on the spot. In front of every person in this room." She smiled. The smile of someone making a bet they have no intention of paying. "And if you don't, you pack your desk by noon. Those are the terms." She said it the way someone says a thing they are certain they will never have to answer for. The point was not the wager itself. The point was to show the room that she considered the outcome so impossible she was willing to stake her chair on it. Several executives exchanged glances. The expensive kind, half thrill and half theater, the look of people watching something they will recount later at dinner as though they had not participated. Daniel looked at Diana. He looked at the trash can. He looked at the room. Then he crouched down beside the trash can and picked up his proposal, page by page, the way you pick up something that has value regardless of where it's been placed. He did not hurry. He did not look at anyone while he did it. He squared the pages against his knee. He stood. For one moment his eyes met Diana's, and what she saw in them was not what she expected. Not anger. Not the flushed, burning look of a man who has been publicly humiliated. Something quieter than that. Something she would not be able to name that night when she was alone and found herself returning to the image of his face. Daniel walked out of the conference room. The door closed behind him with a sound that seemed louder than it should have been. In the hallway, the ordinary noise of the office returned around him. He walked to the window at the end of the corridor and stood there with his hands at his sides, looking down at the street 11 floors below. He let the full weight of what had happened settle over him. He gave himself 90 seconds. Not more. Because the arithmetic of his life did not leave room for more than 90 seconds of feeling anything that did not move him forward. He could not lose this job. It was not pride that made the thought unthinkable. It was Marcus. It was the specialist appointments and the monthly medication and the specific school Marcus attended because the program there was the right one for the way his mind worked and the way his body needed to be treated. It was the mortgage on the apartment that was 3 subway stops from that school. It was the understanding, so deeply built into Daniel's daily life that he rarely thought about it consciously, that everything he had structured around Marcus's needs had been structured around the salary. He stood at the window and let all of that be true. And then, somewhere underneath the weight of it, a different thought surfaced. Careful. Small. But alive. Diana had made a wager. She had made it publicly, in front of 14 witnesses, and she had built it on the assumption that there was no way Daniel could do the impossible thing she dared him to do. She had assumed the official channels were the only channels. She had assumed that a man with no title and no authority could not reach Crestline without going through Apex. She had never said he had to go through Apex. She had simply assumed he would have to. And in assuming it, she had left the method entirely to him. Daniel turned this over carefully. Crestline was going to sign with Apex tomorrow. They were going to sign on a proposal that didn't serve their actual needs. Because no one had shown them the proposal that did. He was holding that proposal in his hands. The only barrier between his work and the people who needed to see it was the chain of command. And the chain of command had just thrown him out. There was a strange kind of freedom in that. A man who has been removed from the official process is no longer bound by it. He pulled out his phone. He opened everything he had on Crestline's leadership. He found the name he needed in under 2 minutes. Crestline Partners was run by a man named Victor Harmon. 60 years old. Built the company himself over 22 years from a regional operation into a firm with holdings in 4 states. By every account Daniel had gathered in 3 weeks of research, Harmon was the kind of executive who still made the important calls himself rather than delegating them to layers of intermediaries. If there was one person in the world whose word could turn tomorrow's signing into something entirely different, it was Victor Harmon. The trouble was that Victor Harmon did not take meetings with strangers. Especially strangers who showed up uninvited the evening before a major deal was set to close. Daniel looked up Crestline's city office address. Harmon was in town for the negotiations. He had been in town all week. The window was tonight. Tonight or never. He looked at the time. He thought about Marcus. He called Mrs. Adeyemi, the neighbor who had watched Marcus during emergencies for 4 years, who called him Uncle Daniel's good neighbor friend in a way that made Marcus roll his eyes and secretly love it, and asked if she could stay with Marcus until he got home. She said of course. She always said of course. He texted Marcus, unexpected thing at work. Mrs. Adeyemi is coming. I will be home. Count on it. Marcus texted back, okay. Is it the bad kind of unexpected or the good kind? Daniel looked at the message for a moment. Working on making it the good kind, he wrote back. He picked up his proposal and his bag and walked out of the building. The Crestline office sat in a low serious building on the west side of the city, the kind of building that looked like a place where real work happened rather than a place designed to impress visitors. Daniel sat in his car outside it for a moment. Then he got out before he could talk himself out of it. The woman at the reception desk looked up when he came through the door. He told her he was here in connection with Apex Financial regarding the partnership they were closing tomorrow. That he needed 15 minutes with Victor Harmon on a matter he believed was time-sensitive. It was not a lie. He simply chose not to clarify that he was not here on Apex's behalf. The distinction, he felt, could be addressed if and when he got into the room. What followed was the longest wait of his professional life. He sat in a chair in a quiet lobby while the building emptied around him, while the light through the windows changed from afternoon to evening to the particular darkness that falls over a city when most of its people have gone home to their lives. Twice a young assistant came out to say that Mr. Harmon was occupied. Twice Daniel said he understood. He did not leave. He thought about Marcus, doing homework at Mrs. Adeyemi's kitchen table. He thought about the note he would leave tomorrow morning. He thought about Diana dropping his work into a trash can with the ease of a woman who had never once imagined it might cost her anything. He thought about what he had built and what it was worth. And he waited. The man who finally walked out of the corner office was older than his photographs and harder around the eyes. Victor Harmon crossed the lobby and studied Daniel the way someone studies a problem they had not budgeted time for. I'm told you've been out here for 3 hours, Harmon said. No warmth in it. Only the blunt curiosity of a man who had not gotten where he was by being sentimental about time. I have, Daniel said. You've got 15 minutes. Make them count. Daniel stood and followed him through the door. The office Harmon led him into was plain, a wide table, functional chairs, the kind of room where arguments happened rather than performances. Harmon sat and folded his hands. Before you start, Harmon said, I want you to know what I already know. Your name isn't on the list of anyone authorized to speak for Apex. My assistant ran it while you were sitting in my lobby. His eyes were level and completely unimpressed. So what you are is a man who showed up here alone and unannounced, with no authority to represent the company he works for, the night before we sign a deal with that company. That's either someone in serious trouble, or someone who has something I need to hear. I haven't decided which. Daniel had expected this. He was glad it had come early. It's both, he said. I won't pretend it isn't. But I'd rather you judge me by what's in these pages than by how I got into this room. He placed the proposal on the table between them. You've already seen Apex's official proposal. I'm the one who read your filings closely enough to know it answers the wrong question. Give me the 15 minutes. I'll show you the right one. Harmon did not reach for the proposal. You understand how this looks, he said. A man who goes around his own leadership isn't a partner I can trust. Whatever you're offering tonight, you can't actually deliver it. You don't have the standing to commit anything. He leaned back. Convince me you're not wasting the time I let you talk your way into. It was the hardest question. Daniel had known it would come. You're right that I can't commit anything tonight, he said. But the plan doesn't depend on me. It depends on whether it's correct. If it is, Apex will honor it, because no company walks away from the better deal once they've seen it clearly. He held Harmon's gaze. All I'm asking is that you let me show you it's the better deal. After that, the authority sorts itself out. Something in the steadiness of that made Harmon reach out and pull the proposal toward him. He read the first page. Then the second. The room filled with the specific quiet of a man concentrating. Daniel stayed silent. He had learned over 8 years of doing this work that the worst thing you could do when a document was being read was talk over it. The plan either held up under scrutiny or it didn't. He believed it would. Harmon stopped on the third page and tapped a figure. This margin you're referencing. You're claiming our current operational structure is costing us significantly more than we've calculated. An edge in the question. Where did you get this number? Your own quarterly filings cross-referenced against 2 of your direct competitors who restructured the same operational model 18 months ago, Daniel said. The figure isn't an estimate. It's what you're already paying, laid next to what you would pay under a different structure. Your internal number is lower because it measures the cost you can see. This measures the cost you're not seeing. He met Harmon's eyes without blinking. I'd stake more than a meeting on that number. I already have. Harmon studied him for a long moment. The edge in his expression shifted into something more careful. He turned back to the report. This time his reading was different, less like a man looking for the flaw and more like a man beginning to suspect the flaw was on his own side of the table. Walk me through this section out loud, Harmon said eventually, pushing the report across the table. Without looking at it. It was a test sharper than the first. A man who had dressed up borrowed work would stumble the moment the document was taken away. Daniel left the report where it landed. He walked Harmon through the entire architecture of the plan from memory, the operational gap underneath Crestline's numbers, the precise point where money was leaking, the way his plan sealed that leak while Apex's official proposal sailed past it entirely. He explained why the surface-level solution Apex had been preparing would look effective for 2 quarters and then make Crestline's situation worse than before. He connected every claim to its source without hesitation. Harmon interrupted 4 times. Each interruption was sharper than the last, a challenge to an assumption, a demand for a source, a question that tested the floor beneath the entire argument. The hardest one came on the third interruption. A challenge to the central assumption of Daniel's model. If that assumption failed, the whole plan failed. Daniel felt the room tilt for a moment. He had tested that assumption himself more times than he could count. He explained why it held with the plainness of a man who had already tried to break it and couldn't. The fourth interruption came and went. The 15 minutes had long since passed. Neither of them mentioned it. Harmon set his pen down. He looked at Daniel with an expression that had moved past assessment. You're right, he said. The flatness of it carried more weight than enthusiasm would have. Not partially right. You're right about all of it. This is the problem we have been trying to name for 18 months. Your company handed me a solution to a problem I don't have. You've handed me the one that fits. Daniel kept his face still. Here's what I don't understand, Harmon went on. Apex is about to present the wrong proposal to me tomorrow. The person who found the right one is sitting across from me tonight with no title and no authority. He looked at Daniel directly. Somebody over there made a serious mistake. And it wasn't you. That's not for me to say, Daniel answered. And he meant it. He had not come here to trade on Diana's error. I found something I believed you should see. What Apex does with it after tonight is above my pay grade. I only knew I couldn't let the deal close on a plan that would cost you money neither of us could recover once it was signed. Harmon looked at him for a long moment. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, he said. He drew a sheet toward him and picked up a pen. I'm not signing your proposal like a contract tonight. That's not how $3 million gets committed, and you know that. He began to write. What I'm signing is a letter of intent. In my own hand. Stating that Crestline will enter this partnership on the terms in your plan and no other version. The formal contract will be drawn on that basis. He looked up. It's binding on me. But there is one condition attached to it, and it is not negotiable. He held Daniel's eyes. Whoever runs this project on Apex's side, it's you. Not the executive who threw your work away without reading it. You. If Apex wants this deal, they get it with your name on the delivery. Daniel heard the condition and understood immediately what it meant. When he walked back into Apex in the morning, he would not be walking in defeated. He would be carrying a signed commitment worth $3 million. With a client condition that could not be removed. I'll do the work, Daniel said. Simple. Complete. All the agreement Harmon needed. He watched Harmon sign the letter, each stroke deliberate, the pen moving with the certainty of a man who had made his decision and was writing it into something permanent. Harmon folded the letter and held it across the table. This isn't a favor, he said. I don't do favors with $3 million. This is the better deal. I'd be a fool to sign the other one now that I've seen it. A thin dry humor crossed his face. I suspect tomorrow morning is going to be interesting for you. That's one word for it, Daniel said. And for the first time since he had crouched on the floor picking up his own proposal, something in his chest loosened. He took the letter and held it the way you hold something you cannot afford to drop. One more thing, Harmon said as Daniel rose to leave. I'll have someone from my side present tomorrow when you deliver this. Not to verify it. To make sure the company you work for understands this commitment is real and that the condition attached to it is not open to discussion. He allowed himself a small hard smile. I've seen companies pocket the deal and quietly move aside the person who earned it. I don't intend to hand you over to that. Daniel understood the gift in that offer better than Harmon perhaps intended. A signed letter could be questioned, explained away, reframed by executives determined to save face. A Crestline representative standing in the room, confirming everything in person, could not. Thank you, Daniel said. He shook Harmon's hand. He walked out. The office was dark, the lobby empty, the building holding the particular stillness of a place where the important work is already done and everyone else has gone home not knowing. He walked into the cold night air. He stood beside his car for a moment. He took out his phone. He typed a message to Marcus. The good kind, he wrote. Go to sleep. I'll tell you in the morning. He sat in the car for a moment with the letter against his side. He thought about the conference room. About 14 faces arranged around a polished table. About Diana dropping his work into a trash can with the ease of someone who had never once imagined paying for it. He thought about what tomorrow would ask of him. He would walk back in. He would walk past the same desks and the same faces and he would set this down on the same table. And for the first time in 8 years of arriving before anyone else and leaving after everyone had gone, the morning belonged entirely to him. He started the car. He drove home. He thought about one sentence he would write tomorrow morning. Put it under a bowl. Leave it for a boy who kept the notes in a rubber band in the second drawer. He didn't have it yet. By the time he got home, he did. The work always knew what it was worth. Today, the room found out too. He arrived the next morning at his usual hour. Earlier than most. The lobby security guard, a man named Pete who had kept a second coffee ready for him for 6 years without ever being asked to, handed him the cup with the particular nod of someone who does not know what is coming but can tell something is different in the way a person walks. Daniel took the coffee. Rode the elevator to the executive floor. Moved through the hallway with the letter in a plain folder and the coffee in his hand and the composure of a man who has already lived through the hardest part. The conference room had filled again. Some of the executives had come back because the schedule called for it. Some, he could tell by the particular alertness in their posture, had come because word of yesterday's wager had traveled overnight and they wanted to see the second act. The second act, as they understood it, was Daniel clearing out his desk. Richard was already settled into his chair with the comfortable expression of a man expecting entertainment. Susan sat near the window, notepad in front of her, eyes somewhere careful and neutral. Diana stood at the head of the table. She looked rested. She looked the way a person looks when they have decided the next 10 minutes before they arrived. She glanced up when Daniel walked in. Something almost like sympathy crossed her face. The particular sympathy of someone who considers themselves generous for feeling it. You came in, she said. I'll give you that. Most people would have sent an email. A ripple of quiet amusement moved through the room. They read Daniel's calm as resignation. His steadiness as a man who had made peace with how this ended. Richard said something under his breath to the director beside him. The director smiled. No one in the room looked at the folder. Because no one believed the folder contained anything worth looking at. Before you say whatever you came to say, Diana continued, I want to be fair. Yesterday was harsh. The decision stands, but the delivery was harder than it needed to be. You worked on something. It wasn't the right work. But I want to acknowledge that it was work. She believed she was being kind. She was bracing for an ending she had already written. Daniel let her finish. He had learned 8 years ago that interrupting Diana only gave her more room, and this morning he had no use for her room. When she was done, he stepped forward to the table. He set the folder down on the polished surface. He opened it. He turned it so it faced her. You said if I brought back a signed commitment from Crestline on my terms, you'd resign in front of everyone in this room, he said. His voice was even. Unhurried. Those were the terms. You made them in front of every person here. He held his hand flat beside the letter the way Harmon had held his hand beside it the night before. I'd like everyone in this room to see this the same way they saw the wager. The signature at the bottom of the page was visible before anyone had moved. And the room understood what it was looking at a beat before it understood what that meant. The amusement did not vanish all at once. It faded, face by face, as the reality of it traveled around the table like cold air finding gaps. Richard leaned forward. Susan lifted her eyes from her notes for the first time. The silence that followed was total, the specific silence a room produces when every person in it has been wrong about the same thing at the same moment. Diana looked at the letter. She did not touch it. Her certainty was still visible in her posture, holding on through momentum, but her eyes moved across the page, and caught on the figure, and caught on the name in the condition at the bottom, and Jacob watched the exact moment the momentum ran out. This isn't, she said. The sentence had nowhere to go. Crestline doesn't close until this afternoon. You couldn't have. You don't have the. She stopped. I don't, Daniel agreed. I never said I did. He kept his voice even. No triumph in it. The facts were heavy enough on their own. I went to Victor Harmon last night. Not as Apex's representative. As myself, with nothing but the plan you put in the trash. He read it. All of it. He looked at her directly. He committed the $3 million to the version I built because it solves the problem his company actually has. The proposal we were going to hand him this afternoon solves a problem they don't have. The door at the far end of the room opened before Diana could respond. A man in a dark coat stepped through it with the unhurried authority of someone who had been expected, by Daniel, at least. The Crestline representative introduced himself in a few plain sentences. He confirmed that Victor Harmon had signed the letter of intent the previous evening. He confirmed that Harmon had done so with full knowledge of what he was signing. He confirmed that the formal contract would be drawn on those terms. And he confirmed the condition. Mr. Harmon asked me to be present this morning, the representative said, looking around the table without warmth, because he's seen what happens when a company accepts a deal and quietly removes the person who actually made it possible. He wanted to ensure that wasn't going to happen here. A pause. The commitment is real. The condition is real. Daniel Sullivan runs this project or there is no project. Those terms came from the top and they are not open to discussion. He let that settle. And the executives who had laughed the loudest yesterday found they could not meet his eyes. Diana sat down. It was, in itself, a kind of admission. She was not a woman who sat when she could stand over a room. She understood all at once and completely what she had done. She had publicly dismissed the one person in her company capable of landing the most important deal of the year. She had wagered her own position on his failure in front of every executive who reported to her. She had done it without reading a single page of the work that had just proven her wrong. The wager she had made to demonstrate her certainty had become the instrument of her own exposure. The board session that followed was not theatrical. It was the real kind, closed, quiet, serious. The first question was simple. Had the CEO reviewed the proposal before discarding it in front of the executive board and publicly wagering her position against it? The answer could not be softened. She had not. That single fact reframed everything. It was one thing for a leader to weigh a plan and judge it wrong. It was another to dismiss it unexamined, to build a public spectacle of contempt around work she had never looked at, and to be proven definitively wrong by the client the plan had been written for. The board turned next to the executives who had participated in the laughter. Richard was asked directly why he had smiled through the public humiliation of a colleague whose work he had also never examined. He had no answer that survived being said out loud. Susan admitted that she had looked away precisely because she suspected the treatment was unfair, and had chosen the safety of silence over the cost of speaking. The room was quieter than it had been in years. Diana spoke last. She had sat through all of it without the shield of her certainty, and the experience had remade something in her. She had spent her entire career believing that her instinct was worth more than the voices beneath her. The belief had built real things, which was exactly what had made it so difficult to question. Now it lay exposed before the board next to a commitment signed by the client she had been most certain of winning on her own terms. "I didn't read it," she said. She made herself say it plainly. To all of them. "I decided I already knew what it was worth because of who it came from." That's not judgment. That's the opposite of judgment. She looked at the table. "I publicly staked my own position to prove a point about a man whose work I never opened. And the only reason this company has the Crestline deal is that he refused to let my mistake become the company's mistake." The board's decision, when it came, was not a clean dramatic resolution. Diana kept her position. But not without cost. Not without consequence. A formal process was required, one that ensured no proposal could be dismissed without review, regardless of who submitted it. Every idea would be evaluated on its merits and the evaluation documented. The culture that allowed contempt to masquerade as leadership would be dismantled and replaced with something that did not depend on who was in the room. Diana would lead the reform herself. Which was both a second chance and a permanent reminder. Daniel was named Director of Client Strategy. Not as a gift from a board managing its guilt. As the recognition, years overdue, that the work he had been doing from a non-director chair had been director-level work for a long time. The only thing that had kept the title away was the noise of other people performing ambition loudly enough to drown out results. He accepted it the way he accepted most things. Without a speech. Without performance. The weight of it settled somewhere that had been empty for a long time, and he let it settle without calling attention to it. The executives came to him one by one over the following days. Richard's apology was stiff and formal, a man correcting himself before he was fully convinced he needed to be corrected, but making the correction anyway. It was a beginning. Susan's was quieter and more real. She had known she should have spoken. She said so plainly. She did not dress it up. Daniel received each of them without cruelty. He had not spent 8 years building what he had built in order to spend the next years burning it down. He let the results continue speaking. Which was all he had ever wanted them to do. The Crestline project rolled out over the following months. It did exactly what Daniel had told Harmon it would do. The operational gap closed. The margins climbed. By the end of the first 2 quarters, Crestline's internal financial team had documented results that exceeded the projections in Daniel's proposal. Victor Harmon called Daniel personally to tell him. Not through an assistant. Directly. "I want you to know something," Harmon said. "I've been doing this for 22 years. I've sat across from a lot of people who were certain they were right. You're one of about 4 I can remember who actually were." Daniel thanked him. He was thinking about Marcus. About the note he had left that morning. About a stack of folded papers in the second drawer of a 10-year-old's desk, held together with a rubber band. He was thinking about pickup at 3:30. One afternoon, Diana found him in his office. Not in front of the board. Not in a setting designed for anyone else's benefit. Just the two of them, in the ordinary light of a working day. "I've given the public apology," she said. "The one that was for the room." She looked at him directly. "This is the one that's only for you." She was not wearing the certainty she usually carried. "I was wrong about your work in the most damaging way a leader can be wrong. I dismissed it without looking at it because of where it came from, not what it contained. And you had every reason to let me fall." She held his gaze. "You didn't. I don't fully understand why. But I won't forget it." Daniel told her what was true. He had wanted the work to be judged fairly. A company where that happened was worth more to him than any single person's mistake. And he meant it. The thing that stayed with everyone who had been in that conference room was not the $3 million. Though the money was real. Though the deal reshaped the year in every way the board had hoped for. What stayed was the lesson. The one no one had wanted to learn and none of them could now set down. A leader is not the person who is always right. A leader is the person who listens before passing judgment. Who reads before deciding. Who understands that certainty and wisdom are not the same thing, and that mistaking one for the other is the most expensive error a person in power can make. Diana had made that mistake. She had paid for it in front of everyone she was responsible to. And underneath the drama of it all, underneath the wager and the letter and the Crestline representative and the board session, sat a quieter truth that everyone in the building had now been forced to carry. The person treated with the least respect is sometimes the one carrying the answer everyone else has missed. Daniel Reese had known that about himself for 8 years. He had known it alone, without confirmation, without anyone in the building willing to look long enough to see it. It had taken a trash can and a signed letter and a night spent in a stranger's lobby to force the room to finally see it too. That evening Daniel drove to pick up at 3:30. Not 1 minute later. Marcus came through the school gate with his bag slung over one shoulder, His jacket half unzipped despite the cold, looking the way 10-year-olds look when they are certain they do not need to be told to zip their jacket. He got into the car. He looked at Daniel. "Was it the good kind?" he asked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "It was the good kind." Marcus studied him for a moment with his mother's eyes. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" Marcus considered this with the seriousness he brought to questions that mattered. "Like you stopped waiting for something," he said. Daniel looked at his son. He thought about 8 years of 6 a.m. mornings and notes under bowls and specialist appointments and turning down 2 promotions and working in a room that didn't know his name. He thought about a trash can and a letter and a drive across the city in the dark. He thought about a stack of papers in a rubber band in the second drawer. "Yeah," he said. He started the car. "I did." They drove home through the city. The lights coming on. The buildings catching the last of the evening and giving it back in pieces. Daniel did not look for the glass tower on the skyline. It had stopped being the measure of anything that mattered. That night, after Marcus was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. Not with a spreadsheet. Not with a client file. With a piece of paper and a pen. He wrote one sentence. He folded it once. He set it under the bowl he would fill in the morning. The work always knew what it was worth. Now so does everyone else. Outside, the city breathed its cold ordinary breath against the windows. Inside, a man who had spent 8 years being invisible to the people around him sat in the warmth of his own kitchen. Knowing, for the first time without any doubt at all, that the thing he had built, quietly, carefully, without anyone's confirmation, had always been worth exactly what he believed it was. He turned off the kitchen light. He checked on Marcus. He went to bed. And in the morning he would wake up early. He would make breakfast. He would leave the note. He would go to work in the building where his name was finally on the door that mattered. And he would do it all the same way he had always done it. Quietly. Completely. For the only reason that had ever been worth doing anything.